Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Happy Thanksgiving to you if you're watching this on the day that I publish it, because this is going live on Thanksgiving. KeyForge has been out for just about a week now, and it's been awesome. I think the time has come to start working on top 10 lists. So I'm bringing you a top 10 list today of the top 10 discards. Not discarding cards, but cards from the Dis faction that I look for when I'm opening up a deck. These are generally going to be, like, as of right now, this is very, very preliminary. Again, this list will probably change as the game matures, as we learn the game better. And I have been playing for a while. I've been playing a lot this past week. I've also been playing the game since Gen Con. So I think I'm kind of familiar with the game, but then again, some of you are going to have different experiences than I've had. Everybody's experiences are going to be different because every deck is unique. So this is by no means a final or comprehensive list. This is a top 10 that's meant to be very preliminary in how things look right now, at least from my own perspective. But I'd love to hear from you and what you maybe disagree with me or what you think is should have been included. And there's a lot of really good cards in Dis. It's actually probably my favorite faction overall right now. And I just, I had a top 15, and it was really hard kind of whittling this down to the top 10. So I also want to remind you guys there is a huge giveaway. If you're new, if you're just finding me for the first time, I run giveaways all the time, but this one is a really big one for the holidays. It is for a Superstar Destroyer for Star Wars Armada in the form of a Cool Stuff gift card, which then, of course, you could use for whatever you wanted. You don't have to get, if you don't play Star Wars Armada, although you should, because that game is awesome. But yes, I'm giving away a huge gift card for Star Wars Armada that will be announced on or around the 21st of December. I usually announce winners towards the end of my videos, and I usually do smaller giveaways about every month or so. So I have giveaways running all the time, and all it takes to enter any of those giveaways, including this one, is to become a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that, and then you're automatically entered. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into the top 10 cards from Dis. Number 10 is Poltergeist. I really, really like this card for a number of reasons. First off, it gives you an amber, so right away it's automatically a good card. It is a little bit conditional, though, because of the fact that it's dealing with artifacts. So when you play this card, you can use an artifact controlled by any player as if it were yours, and then destroy the artifact. So when I look at this card, I'm seeing three things. First off, amber. Always good. It's automatically good because it has that. So that's like you can even, when you play one of these cards, you do as much as you can. So even if they don't have an artifact, you can still play this and gain an amber from it. That's not the best use of it, but that's certainly something you can do. Better than just discarding it and not getting an amber. But the other thing that's great about this is just the amount of control. The fact that it's doing really three things in one card is really nice. And yes, it's situational because they have to have an artifact. So this may not be the best first turn play, but it's a really good mid-game card. Because, first off, being able to use an opponent's artifact as if it's your own is great. There's so many artifacts out there, and some of them are going to be in this list, that are just really nasty, that either really help your opponent or really hurt you. There's artifacts that make you discard cards, and there's not a whole lot of artifact removal in the game. There's a whole lot more creature removal than artifact removal, largely due to the fact that there's a whole lot more creatures than artifacts. A lot of decks don't have that many artifacts, and that's why this one's a little lower on the list. But gosh, almost, so many decks do have at least one, and I find a lot of decks tends to have maybe around two to three average, with some being more and some being less. But usually when your opponent's going to have an artifact, it's going to be nasty, and there's not always going to be that many ways that you can deal with it. So this does a couple of things. For one, it lets you use that artifact. So if it's maybe to steal something, or to destroy a creature, or to return something to somebody's hand, or make somebody discard terrible stuff, you get to use that, which is great. But then you get to destroy the artifact. So even if it's not an artifact that you want to use, maybe it's just an artifact that has a passive effect, you do as much of the card as you can. So then you still get to destroy an artifact. So many things. Very multi-purpose card. Does a lot of different things. But it is a little bit singular towards artifact, but it lets you use it and lets you destroy it. And of course, you'll have to do both if you can. But I really, really like this card. Great card to have. Number 9, Key to Dis. Speaking of artifacts, This one is a very strong artifact. It's got the Omni ability where you sacrifice Key to Dis and destroy each creature. Board clearing is just one of those mechanics you kind of want to have in a deck. It's a great mechanic to have. You're going to face, if you don't have anything to clear out the board, you're going to eventually face decks that have lots of creatures. They just keep building them up, and you're going to eventually get to this point where your opponent can just reap and gain like 5-6 amber every turn. And if you can't clear out a lot of creatures, you're not going to have that much success. So every deck needs some kind of way to clear out creatures. That's something you kind of hope for. This is a really nice way to do that because it's got the Omni effect. The Omni effect is great. And again, we said there's not a whole lot of stuff that can deal with artifacts. So you bring this out and now you don't have to play Dis. You can play anything. So it makes it very flexible. And the reason that that's important is maybe you want to reap with all your creatures before you clear the board. Or what's I think is slightly more likely is maybe after you clear the board, you want to play your own creatures. And maybe Dis isn't the faction that you get a lot of creatures with. In every deck, you're going to have 3 factions, and sometimes, one faction only have like 3 creatures, and then it's like a different one that has like 6 or 7. And so you kind of want, ideally, when I like to clear the board, I like to put out a whole bunch of creatures afterwards, so then it's all in my favor. Now the ball is in my opponent's court. They have to try to figure out how many they can deal with. And so Key to Dis is going to let you do that, and it's so flexible. Whichever faction you have that you're ready to do it with, it gives you the ability to always do it. You don't have to have the card in your hand. You just have to have it on the board. The disadvantage here is that you do kind of broadcast your intentions when you put this card out, because when you play this card, it is going to come into effect. It's going to come into play exhausted, so you're not going to be able to play it and use it right away unless you have something that's going to let you to ready an artifact. So generally, you're going to put it out there, and you're going to give your opponent an entire opportunity to deal with it. The risk of that is kind of slim because there's not that much stuff that destroys artifacts. But now your opponent knows that you have this, so they may deliberately hold back with their creatures, which from a certain point of view isn't really that bad because it gives you all of the control and it's not taking up a valuable spot in your hand, because I hate having a board clearing card in my hand when I have the only creatures. And it becomes one of those, I could discard this card from my hand to make room for more stuff. But sure enough, as soon as I do that, as soon as I discard the card that I don't need, next turn my opponent clears the board, puts all their creatures out, and I think I should have held on to that card. So in this case, I don't have to worry about that. I just love the flexibility here with Key to Dis. Next up, another artifact. Again, I really like artifacts in this faction. At number 8, it is the Dominator Bauble. The Dominator Bauble is just so very, very flexible, and as an action, it lets you use a friendly creature. Now, if you only have Dis creatures, it's not necessarily going to be that great, but what this lets you do is you're going to have other creatures in your deck. And once you get down a multitude of creatures, from other factions as well, this is going to let you use them to either reap, fight, an action, whatever. And you can use a creature outside of Dis. And that's the important part with Dominator Bauble, especially because it can combo into, other creatures like, oh, well, if you reap with this creature, you can ready another creature or use another creature. All kinds of reap abilities that creatures outside of Dis might have. And if you have multiple things on the board, this allows you to continue to use Dis over and over again. And it there are other combos in there that are going to work well with this, where you may find yourself into a situation where you really want to keep calling Dis over and over again. Maybe you get a lot of Dis creatures, but you also want to use your Sanctum creature, things like that. It lets you do that. It gives you a lot of flexibility. And lets you keep using other Dis artifacts as well. So that's the Dominator Bauble. Speaking of other Dis artifacts, is Library of the Damned. This is number 7 on my list, and I love this one because it lets you archive a card. Card draw and archival is usually kind of a logos thing. It's not really the big thing that Dis has. So this is kind of giving you an out of house ability, and it's really, really nice. When you don't have anything else to give you archival. So an archive is giving you that extra card that you can put down, and every time you archive a card, it comes from your hand, at least in this case, unless it specifically says it comes from somewhere else. You can build up an archive, build yourself up to a power turn. Maybe I'm going to take all those Shadows cards, put them out of my hand, keep archiving them, you know, because I don't need, and then when I finally get to where I have, you know, 5 or 6 Shadow cards, now I pull my archive, now I've got 8 Shadow cards or whatever, now I can play this massive turn. So it just lets you kind of have a little control. Also, that's letting you filter through your deck a little bit more. This actually works really great with the Dominator Bauble, because you'll want to keep choosing discs, keep building up that archive. You may want to choose discs like 4 turns in a row, and if you can activate cards on the board from outside of discs, you can keep doing this over and over and over again. And I just think this one is a little more, you know, and these last two are actually very, very close together. I think they actually work well together. But I think this one is a little more universal just because archival is so very good. Especially, another use for archival too is when your opponent has discard cards. If you've got a card in your hand that you just can't have discarded, like it's a crucial card to a combo that you're going to have, you know, you can archive it for safekeeping so you don't ever worry about it being discarded. So I really like Library of the Damned at number 7. Number 6, it's another artifact. It is Life Ward. So Life Ward is a very, very cool one that is, in a way, it's broadcasting your intentions, but it just gives you so much flexibility. So, and what gives this one the extra edge is it also gives you an amber when you play it, which I love. So this is also an Omni ability. You can sacrifice Life Ward, and when you do, your opponent cannot play creatures on their next turn. And that's just so nasty, because creatures are a crucial part of this game, and they're not the end all be all, but it especially really combos well because this does have a lot of board clearing cards and a lot of ways to just eliminate creatures and clear the board. And so it's really nice if you are going to clear the board, you've got Life Ward ready to go, and oh, I cleared the board and I'm going to place them on my own creatures. Oh, and by the way, you can't repopulate the board. So now I'm going to get 2 turns of putting stuff on the board before you can even put your first creature onto the board. It's just nasty, and I really like that because it. And one of the reasons, like this one might seem a little more pigeonholed to specific types of decks, but because it's an Omni, because it gives you an amber, and because almost, you know, most decks, you know, want to put creatures out. You know, there are some decks that have very, very few creatures, but that's definitely, I think, a minority, and even those have some creatures. But I just think that this one is just universal enough that it just has a great way to fit into just about every deck, and you know, and also having it out there and available is going to totally play mind games with your opponent too. So it can actually be fun. This one, I can definitely see this one potentially changing as the game matures and grows, but I think right now it's really a really cool card, and the amber is really the icing on the cake. If it didn't give you the amber, might not have made the list, but I think that amber, in addition to everything else, just really makes this a sweet card. Next up, Gateway to Dis, number 5. I talked about, you know, this faction has a lot of stuff to clear the board, and to deal with creatures, to destroy creatures, deal damage to creatures, kill lots of creatures. Well, this one is just the best one, in my opinion. I mean, there's different ones that are good for different situations. There's some, you know, clearing cards, like, for example, the Key to Dis. Problem is, you put that out, and maybe your opponent has a way to deal with it. Or maybe your opponent knows that you're going to use this, so they deliberately hold back or whatever. You know, the Gateway to Dis, you don't have to broadcast your intentions. You just play it. Done. Clear the board. They can't respond. They didn't know it was coming. And the surprise factor here is just phenomenal. It does cause you to gain 3 chains, but hopefully by the time you're playing this, that won't be that big of a deal. You'll draw a few less cards, but it's always, when you have to play this card, it's worth it. It's worth it. This is one of those cards I always want to have, and every time I don't have it and I need it, I just get very annoyed because this card is so good, just so good to clear the entire board. And knowing that you hold on to it for a little while, this is a card I will hold for several turns, waiting for that right moment. Especially if my opponent has less creatures than I do, and I just hold it, I wait for them to spend their big cards trying to kill my creatures, and then I clear the board and bring out some more creatures. It just, holding onto this card allows you, you know, the knowledge and control to really screw up your opponent's plans, basically. And I love that about this card. It's just so very, very absolute, quick, final, and unstoppable. This is what I would call it. Absolutely love this card. Gateway to Dis. Number 4, Control the Weak. Another amber generating card. This one is an action that when you play this card, you choose a house on your opponent's identity card. Your opponent must choose that house as their active house on their next turn. So nasty. Talk about control. This has control. It really does. And this one is just so evil. It's so evil because you're going to have this card. First off, you're getting an amber. Always good. Amber is one of those crucial things. So you're gaining an amber is really, really nice. But you're able to choose what house your opponent has to pick on their... This is so strong because you're playing... Maybe you have a lot of amber and you're afraid your opponent's going to bait and switch you or something like that because they run shadows. You choose what house... You know, maybe the house they just played last turn where they just dropped 6 Mars cards and they don't, you know, choose Mars again. Or, you know, or maybe you choose the other house because you don't want them to be able to activate all of their Mars creatures. Maybe you did a stun card and you stunned a whole bunch of their creatures. And, you know, you can force them to do that since you know they're not going to be able to do anything. Or maybe they just played a whole bunch of actions. Maybe they just played Logos and drew a whole bunch of cards, archived a whole bunch of cards. And they played just played 6 Logos cards in one turn. You know they're probably set up for a power turn from some other house. Choose Logos again. It's not going to be as good for them to do twice in a row. And this is totally one of those things that's going to depend on what your opponent's doing. The only time this isn't good is if your opponent's playing very, very slow and careful, and maybe only playing 1 or 2 cards tops each turn. And so that, you know, but if that's the case, and maybe they're, you know, that means they're not getting a power turn, and that's a good problem to have. You know, you kind of dread those times where your opponent has a hand full of all cards from one house that all combo together, and they get this amazing power turn where they have 5 creatures and a spell or an action that just combos with all of those creatures, or an artifact that, you know, makes all their, or something that makes all their creatures capture your amber all in one turn from out of nowhere. So this is a great way to kind of prevent stuff like that from happening, and it's just the knowledge that you're going to have before you play this card. Oh, well, you just played 3 Shadows cards last turn? I'll make you play Shadows again. You know, so very, very nice. Love this card. Next up, Succubus. I love the Succubus. Very, very good first turn play too, as a matter of fact. And this has some really good first turn play cards. Some of them I was really tempted to put in this top 10 list that just didn't quite make it, but they were in the top 15. But this one edged out the other ones because, for one, it's a little bit tougher. A lot of Dis's really good first turn play cards are power 2, and there's so many cards that can kill a power 2 creature. Power 3's got a little more survivability, so this one's a better first turn play that's a little bit harder to kill. The Succubus, during their draw card step, your opponent refills their hand up to 1 less card. So not only is this potentially better than other discard cards, if they don't deal with this right away, it's going to hit them every turn. And especially if you get more than one of these out, it can completely ruin your opponent's day. This has other things to make them discard cards as well, and this just combos. There's several discards that force your opponent to discard, and this just combos with all of those, and it doesn't even have to combo with them. And I think that's the thing. This is universally good, hurts every deck exactly the same amount, and it's just so nasty. It's a terrible, terrible card, and this one is one that's so bad it scares your opponent to potentially make a bad play. And like somebody might actually be tempted to run Gateway to Dis against the Succubus after, like, if this is the first turn play, if they don't have any other way to deal with it, because they might not want to, you know, lose out on a card every round. Because then next turn you can call Dis again and then reap with it, and you know. So yeah, Succubus is nasty, and the thing is, you don't even have to call Dis, because it's a static effect. It's always on. It's not a reap effect. It's not a fight effect. It's not an action. It's just always on. So good. That's number 3, the Succubus. Number 2, love this one. Love this one. This is the Collar of Subordination. It's an upgrade. It's the only upgrade to make this list. But man, if this is not just absolutely straightforward, and super powerful. Obey. You play this on a creature, you control the creature. Just straight up steal somebody's creature. It's so nasty, and because it works all the time. Every deck has some creatures. I have not seen any deck that has 0 creatures. You're always going to be able to steal a creature from somebody else. And the thing is, the types of creatures that you can steal, the worse that their deck is, the better this is. There's all kinds of like protection creatures, like taunt creatures, or your creatures that absorb damage and prevent, that creatures that hamper you, like the Succubus, for example. Like, you play a Succubus on me, I'll subordinate. I'll put a collar of subordination. I'll turn your own Succubus against you. It's so very, very nasty. I absolutely love this card because it's just so strong. It's a very, very strong card, and it's universally good. It works in every situation, and it can bring about new combos too, because also this allows you, if you take control of a creature that's outside of your house, this allows you to call a different house altogether too, which is kind of cool too. So if I wasn't running Untamed and I took control of a giant Untamed creature of yours, and I could then call Untamed and use that creature too. Not that that's always the best idea, but it's a cool thing to be able to do. And the number 1 card is nasty. It's the Stringgun Test. Okay. This card is potentially the most broken card in the game, and that's why I put it at number 1. It's only power 1, so you can kind of potentially kill it easy. But look at its ability. When you play this card, you choose a house. Your opponent cannot choose that house as their active house until Stringgun Test leaves play. Now, I have not seen any decks that have more than 1 Stringgun Test in them. But if you had, considering that you can have potentially 4 of a card, if you had 3 Stringgun Test in your starting hand, that's just an instant win. This is just an instant win. And here's why. It's been confirmed by FFG. If there's something saying that you cannot, but then even if you had something that forced you to, forced you to choose a certain house, right? Like, for example, if I played Control the Weak and forced you to play Logos, but then I also brought out Stringgun Test and said, oh, by the way, you can't choose Logos. Well, what happens? Because that's a very good question, and I think a lot of you guys might be kind of scratching your heads at that. Well, the answer is both effects happen. You have to choose Logos, but you can't. So the result is you have no active house, which means you can't do anything. And so if I had 3 Stringgun Tests out, I could totally stop you from doing anything at all. And so, just the way that this is it can combo with other things to just give you complete denial of your opponent's ability to do things. There may be, I would guess there's probably some kind of algorithm out there to prevent this from being, in triplicate in a deck. But it's just nasty. It's so nasty. And I feel like this is, some of those cards you're going to hold on to for just the right moment. Very, very similar to, to telling your opponent that they have to, control the weak, but this stays that way. And so this can really, if you put this next to a Shadow Self or another taunt creature, it's even harder to get rid of it. And depending on who you're playing, you're going to know which houses they have that are known for board clearing abilities. So you can just, if you're playing Dis also, very likely I'll choose Dis. You'll never be able to activate that house again. And so what that means too is you have to choose a different house. So even if you have a whole bunch of stuff out and I play it, and maybe you will be able to get rid of it, I know at least you can't do it on the next turn. So at least you can't do it for 1 turn, but probably for more than that if I've chosen wisely. So this company is just an incredibly, incredibly strong card because you're denying somebody a third of their deck. It can actually be a negative play experience too, potentially. So I really hope this is actually restricted to just 1 per deck because even if you got 2 of these, just could be so nasty. I'll just say, oh, well, you can just use Logos. I'll stop your other 2 houses. Oh, well, good. I hope all the cards that you have are just draw. You can just keep drawing cards all day. You'll never be able to do anything. You know, very, very nasty. But yeah, that's the top 10 list for discs, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with any of my picks? Do you agree with some? Most? Did I leave out anything that you thought should be on there? There's a lot of other cards that I wanted to put on this list. There's a lot of really good first turn plays as well. A lot of really nasty and very fun stuff with this. I think just some of the ones that I wanted to put on there were a little bit more circumstantial, and some were maybe more powerful but required like a combo with a specific deck, so they weren't as universally good. You know, I had different reasons, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I hope you're having a happy Thanksgiving. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Big thanks to my supporters on Patreon. You guys are awesome. Thank you all so much for watching, and play more KeyForge. Have a great day.